Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today's episode is 111, and we are doing our first listener Q&A episode. So we reached out to various social media platforms that both of us are active on, and asked for questions from athletes to see if there's something that they've been kicking around they just haven't been able to figure out, or just to get some additional guidance on something, just shed a little bit more light. But we've got some good results back, and so now we're going to jump right on in. Let's do a little bit of a recap on what our week has been like. It has been quite the week. So Katie, how's your week been?
It's been busy because my son is home with me more. It's the summertime, obviously, for those parents out there. So he's just here. I'm kind of balancing having him home more and trying to do camp. So it's been interesting just trying to get work done and do things and then train. I think training for me has been hard because I can't go out until like the middle of the day sometimes. And it's already been like I think it was like 105 degrees yesterday. Here. It's just been hard. I feel like right now I'm kind of struggling trying to do the training, trying to do the work, trying to balance everything. But today I did get to go do a donkey run. There's a woman here that kind of lives closer into the mountains near Fort Collins that has a bunch of donkeys, and she does these runs where she has basically people come and you can run with a donkey, and we all go in like a pack together and we just run down the road. And I'm trying to learn more about donkeys. I don't think I've ever shared this, but I have a mini donkey that I'm trying eventually would love to actually run and do one of those burro races with. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, Justin. Have you ever?
I haven't, but his name is Peanut
Look
Butter, right?
Peanut Butter, the donkey. Yeah. So eventually would like to. I mean, we might have to get another donkey to make this easier, but I would eventually like to sign up and do one of these burro races that are kind of getting, at least I see more of them. They're in New Mexico, Colorado. There's one up in Leadville that's pretty well known. And so I'm trying to learn more about donkeys and kind of how to handle them and how to run with them. So it was really fun. It was really warm this morning, but I had got to run with a couple donkeys, and we did about 4 or 5 miles. And it was I think one of the greatest things about running with the donkey is that they kind of go at their pace. So you really have to learn how to be patient and kind of run with them and not force them, because if you force them, they don't want to go. It's like it's good for me, I think, in a way, because I just kind of want to go, you know. And when I'm running with them, you have to kind of work with them as like almost a herd. So sometimes they walk, sometimes they run. You know, they don't always run at the pace you want. So it was an experience. I mean, they're just lovely, like just sweet. You know, like I love donkeys. So it was fun. So that was a nice day. That was a nice thing to do today. It made me happy because I was able to get up there and do that and experience something different, I guess. So
yeah,
awesome. That was my story for the day. And you were at a race, weren't you, this weekend?
Yeah, this weekend we were at the Kinetic multi-sport. It's the Culpeper race. So they had a sprint and an Olympic triathlon race on Saturday. So we took the race day coaching tour up to Culpeper, Virginia, which is about an hour and 45 minutes from where we live. And we always drive up like the night before so that we're there during packet pickup. And we've really gotten to know the race director with Kinetic Multisports. Greg is an incredible guy. It's an awesome race organization. We're so blessed to have those guys in our backyard. I've raced quite a few of their races. I have a couple more that I'm about to register for. I have like 3 days before the rates increase, and I've been kicking around this idea of doing these races, and I just hadn't pulled the trigger. I've already committed to like training for them, so I'm in week 3 or 4 of the training plan, but I just have not registered for it. There's something that's just holding me back. But so we had a really, really good time. meeting athletes. So if you don't know what the race day coaching tour is, what we do is I have a big 10 by 10 canopy and a banner that I take up there. It's like, new to triathlon, ask a coach. And so what we do is we just set up this booth, and we're available for the whole race, especially during the day before, during packet pickup. I do, if the race does not have a coaching company sponsor that's already in it, Greg allows me to do a transition clinic. So after they have the athlete briefing, I get the athletes to come down to the canopy and I show them how to set up their transition area, just the logistics of what's going to happen the next day. I point them out like where they're going to be going, where they're coming in and out of transition with the different disciplines. And I answer I'm answering any last minute questions. We have really good conversation actually on race day, where people are coming up either before with super last minute questions, or right afterwards where they have some, this is kind of what my race went, or this is what I've got coming up. What are your ideas on something? This time I think they were a little short on volunteers. And so we happened to have been set up right by the body marking area, which is on race morning. If you've never done a triathlon, what they do is they write your bib number and your category. So whether you're racing an age group, or if you're in another category like a Clydesdale, Athena, or they have military divisions and college divisions, and you get body marked. And so I think they were running low on volunteers, and to send the volunteers that they did have out to the bike course. And so a line was forming for body marking. And so I jumped in and asked the lady if she needed some help. And so I got to spend, 20 to 30 minutes, body marking athletes. And I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. It's really, it's tiring, because I'm an introvert by nature. And so doing these things and being quote unquote on for like 48 hours is a lot to ask of me. But, thankfully my wife ends up driving to and from these events. So I passed out like as soon as I got in the car to come home, and I slept the whole way home. So it's like a complete navigator failure. And, so yeah, it was.
Yeah, you're lucky to have her support for that.
Yeah, these things, these events are so they're teaching me how to kind of like step out of my comfort zone, and I'm learning to kind of just make myself available to people without trying to sell them a service. I'm not trying to sell myself as a coach. If somebody comes to me and asks, hey, what are your coaching services? Of course, I'm going to talk to them about that, and and share my philosophy in hopes that they do reach back out. But I'm not trying to sell them a training plan. I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm just making myself available to them. And so I'm kind of learning how to do that, kind of be a servant. And I feel that that's important, even if it never results in any athletes, turning into clients or whatever. At least it's helped me become more sociable, more willing to interact with others, and kind of get over my fear of just walking up to people and just talking to them. So it was fantastic. But today I had my long ride. So whenever I have these events, everything is like super compressed. So I spend all week trying to like get ahead of the game in terms of training plans for my athletes. And, then my training gets shifted around. So today I ended up having my long ride out there. And so I'm kind of burnt. I'm just tired. I'm kind of run down. And so, but it's worth it.
Yeah, you've had a little bit more busy. You've been a little busier, like it's just stuff going on. I feel like I've just been more balancing mom stuff versus, like it hasn't been, I don't feel like burnt out, just more so like trying to kind of navigate the summer. Like I think a lot of parents can relate to that if they have small kids, is trying to kind of get through the summer before school starts again, and you're trying to navigate your work stuff plus your own training, and then the heat, and then you're also more like a different. You're doing these races, and that's a lot.
I'm also a sponsor of a local triathlon club that's here in the area. And so I've been playing a more active role in getting to meet some of the members and kind of using the same kind of approach and just helping people. I've got a bike clinic that I'm going to be hosting next week, I think, with the club. And so we'll be spending like 60 minutes talking about cycling and racing strategies and training strategies. Then I have a coached swim session that I'll be doing in the very first week in September. So, and I've got some more irons in the fire for 2027 already. So kicking around ideas. So it's never a dull moment around here. And I'm supposed to be relaunching my website and completely redoing it on a different platform. And I just can't find the time. Any listeners out there that have a skill of building websites, reach out. If you want free coaching, we can set up a barter system. You relaunch my website and I'll coach you for free. And we can work that out. But,
I feel like just help with like getting like social media, or like, I don't know, just like certain things about like putting myself out there. Like you're kind of like doing that locally by going to races. I guess I could try to figure out a way to do that, with the nutrition piece too. But sometimes just like putting myself out, and try on like how to like put stuff on social media or like content creation. I feel like that is business.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things in school I did not learn was marketing, business stuff. You learn how, those are all things I feel like I just don't understand very well. I could use some help with that. But I think for me, it is like a lot to have to do with time, finding time to do things. So I can definitely feel what you're saying, because I have a lot of things I want to do like that, but it's trying to find the time. So delegating it out to someone else, probably something I should do, but also it's hard because there's a cost usually to it. So like building a whole website, probably if you're not doing it yourself, I'm sure there's a pretty good cost to that to hire someone. So
yeah, I looked into it and it was like $5,000 that
whoa.
was kind of the price quote that I saw.
Let's jump into our questions and
let's jump on in.
Kind of dive in. Yeah.
Let's look at the first one. The first one that we got was from Marcus Altman. So he's he's a guy that I know. We're on Team Zoot together, so we're both on that team, and he's also a member of the Richmond Tri Club that I'm a sponsor for. And his question. Great guy, Marcus. So we've shared a couple podiums over the past 2 years, and so he's a really nice guy. So his question is, with so many coaches, influencers, YouTube videos offering advice and tips, how do you know which is the right advice for you? So thank you, Marcus, for that. Katie, what are your thoughts on that one? And then I'll share some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard because I feel like there is a lot of advice out there, like in YouTube or even just quick blurbs on something like Instagram. I think it's hard if you don't have much background in like endurance sports sometimes to know what somebody's saying, even to be able to like distinguish if it's something that is legit or not. You know what I mean? Or like, is it even right for you? So I think this is something that can be hard. One thing I will say though, when it comes to anybody posting online, I think the first thing you'd want to maybe ask is like what are their credentials, because if it is a coach who has a coaching certificate or experience, as a coach, or maybe some sort of exercise degree or something like that, I think that gives them more legitimacy than somebody who's just like a run influencer that just kind of is like, oh, I've been running for a couple of years, I'm going to share my tips or something like that. So like kind of looking for somebody who has some background or some sort of credential, some sort of something that kind of gives them some legitimacy. And then also like if somebody's saying like this is how you do it, this is how you do it, like you need to do this and you'll be better, or this is the only, like if you just follow this formula, I don't know, I'm trying to say this right, but it's like everybody, if you can really know if somebody really knows what they're talking about, if they're explaining it and they're giving you like the nuance of it, or they're giving you some sort of reasoning behind it, like, okay, maybe it was from a research article, or there's something kind of to back up what they're saying. It's not just like, this is my formula for running a faster race, or do you just do these things? And there's, I don't know, like it's sometimes I think you can really trust somebody a little bit more if they actually have a little bit of like nuance, like behind what they're saying. I don't know if that makes sense, but sometimes I feel like people who are very like, this is exactly how you do it. Like, this is how I ran my marathon and I did these things and that, you're going to be good too if you just do this. And they're very so sure of themselves, and there's no like, well, it might work in this situation, or, but I feel like those people I'm a little bit more weary. But unfortunately, I think we tend to gravitate more towards those people who are online who are very, very certain. You know what I mean? Like, this is it. This is how you do it. Or this, it's black and white. It's not, there's no like nuance to it. Whereas if somebody's online talking about something and they're kind of, explaining how this works, but maybe they're saying, okay, there's a little bit of nuance to it. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I think sometimes you can kind of tell right away if somebody who's a YouTuber or something, if they're actually like even giving you information that's kind of credible or that you should take maybe and use. So I don't know, maybe you have a better way of explaining what I just tried to explain, because I don't think I did a very good job. I feel like I need an example and I can't think of one.
I think that there's...
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is we mentioned this, I think, in the last podcast episode, where I classified these people as training plan coaches. Rather than coaching the athlete, they will coach to a formula or a training plan that has been quote unquote data supported, science driven. All these little keyword and buzzwords is just something that is supposed to make you buy into their particular method of coaching. Now, just because they've had success with a particular process or method does not mean it should be considered a universal process, and that if it's not plug and play where you can just kind of go in and execute that particular plan and you should expect similar results. I don't think it works that way. If that were the case, then we would all be successful, because there's a lot of different plans that are out there that we've seen good results. You can always tell when somebody's trying to BS their way through a topic. So, I mean, I remember as a kid, you can always like kind of like when you read a paper for somebody, like a book report paper that you didn't read the book. As a teacher, you can sit there and read that. You can tell this kid did not read this book. I know it. They're just BSing their way through it. And I think we should be able to pick up on that pretty easily when we see stuff on social media and YouTube.
I think so, but I do think sometimes people want, I don't know, like an easier formula sometimes. And I think when people come on social media and are like very sure of themselves, there's almost like, there's a word for it where somebody just has enough information, and that the influencer themselves may actually be pretty sure of themselves because they just have enough information. This is how I was in graduate school when I was studying nutrition. I thought I was like the expert. I'm like, oh my gosh, as I was learning nutrition, at first when I started to learn it, I thought I knew everything. But then once I learned more and more and more about different aspects of nutrition for different diseases and different things, I realized it was like, actually, I don't know everything. But there was a point in time when I was just starting out, even just going through grad school and like learning these topics, like, my gosh, I am the SISHIT, you know what I mean? Like, I know everything. Like, and then it's like, there's a cusp that I kind of had to go over of like, oh, wait a second. Oh, no, I don't know everything. Like there's so much that I still have to learn, and I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And so I think that happens a lot. This is where nutrition can be kind of dangerous itself, like nutrition topics or training, because you just learn a little bit about something, or you just learn a little bit about training concepts, or you have a couple of years of experience and you think, oh, well, I know a lot. And I think people then come across sometimes on these YouTube or, on these channels and are like very sure of themselves because they probably do think they're right, or they think that they, what they have to say is and maybe they have some truth to it. Like maybe it does, but they haven't had enough experience with it, or they haven't learned enough about training or about nutrition and know the nuance yet. So they come off very sure of themselves. And I think that people gravitate towards that because they want to have somebody that's like, oh, well, they sound like they know what they're talking about. Whereas if you're listening to people that have a lot more background, you can sense it when they're talking, like, this is the case, but, in these certain circumstances, they'll be able to kind of talk more about like, well, this is a great training concept, but it may not work for these types of individuals, or they're not so like sure, like this is absolutely the truth and there's no other possibility. Does that make sense?
It's definitely dangerous if this person is coming and saying, this is the process that works.
Right.
And if they seem pretty sure that, hey, if you just do this, then you'll get the result that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
If the person isn't asking follow-up questions, then that should be a red flag in terms of their legitimacy.
Or they're just like, it's like blanket statements, like this is going to work for everyone. This is how this works. Like for nutrition, it's kind of like those statements of like, everybody should be following this diet, or, or like, this is going to work for everyone. There's no like nuance, or, the keto diet is like the best diet. There's no like, I don't know, like it's that so sureness of what they're saying of like, oh, well, but actually that's probably not the best diet for some people, or it may be okay for some, but these people there's people that probably wouldn't benefit from that. And that sort of discussion of the nuance, it's like very, very sure of this is how you do it, and this is going to work for everyone. Kind of that sort of language. And I wish I had more of a way to articulate that.
I mean, you mentioned something about the certifications, and I do want to say that I've talked with a lot of certified coaches that are crap. So,
okay.
I mean, the certifications, I think to a certain extent do provide some level of credibility, but if they're still coming across as, this is what you should be doing, this is all you need to do, then their certification is nothing more than just a piece of paper at that point in time. So you have what I call like theoretical coaches, which are coaching to the textbook, versus a tactician who is taking the knowledge and applying it to a particular athlete's situation or scenario or circumstances. And all circumstances are different. So there's more than one way to train to get to the same result. So if somebody's telling you that this is the way to do it, then there should be a red flag right off the bat. My advice to Marcus is this: there's nothing wrong with experimentation. So if you hear something that is coming from another coach or an influencer or a YouTube video, Marcus is a pretty smart guy. So I would say, use a little bit of your discernment when it comes to, does this jive with stuff that I've kind of heard before? Are there maybe some nuances to this that maybe is a little bit different than what other people are saying? So if it kind of goes in the same direction as other approaches, then that lends some credibility to the process. But there's nothing wrong with you taking that approach and just trying it and see if it does work for you, because I don't think that you can get advice from a YouTuber or another coach or an influencer and already have some kind of level of assuredness or certainty that it's right for you unless you try and implement it. And, just give yourself a time frame. Say, I'm going to try this method for 30 days. And all it's going to cost you is potentially 30 days. I mean, if they're going to say, hey, if you've never run a day in your life, but we want, this approach now has you running 6 days a week, then yeah, I think your discernment should already flag. It's like, okay, that doesn't sound right. But to a certain extent, I think that you can say, okay, I'll try this for 15 to 30 days. And if it's working, then I'll say that worked for me. It may not work for somebody else, but it may be good for you. One conversation that I had this weekend with another athlete was that she was saying that she was kind of new to swimming. And so she's been watching YouTube videos and all this kind of stuff about swimming. And I said, I think that's a great approach. to educate yourself. But I want to lend a little piece of caution that if you're watching YouTube videos from professional swimmers, like these people are Olympians, national champions, I want you to keep in mind, these people have been swimming probably their entire life. So if you're an adult onset swimmer and you're trying to replicate what these people are telling you to do, it's going to require a little bit of patience. You're not going to be able to just execute this, right off the bat and all of a sudden become a great swimmer. These people have been honing their craft for a really long time. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're watching, this content. It's like, okay, how long has this person been doing this? Should it look that easy? And if it's not that easy when you try and implement it, then that kind of tells you something that, okay, well, maybe they had maybe just an innate ability. They may have had some genetics that made them really, really good at this approach. I may not be very good at this approach, or I may have some limitations that keep me from executing what this person is saying. It doesn't mean that it's bad advice. It was just bad. It was just not suitable for you. So that's my advice, is that don't be afraid to try it, but put a limit on it and just say, okay, if it's not working, it's not working.
Yeah. I think too, it kind of goes along that same, we can kind of move on to the next one, but I just want to say, I watch a lot of YouTube videos of elite athletes and their training because it's fascinating to me what they're doing. I'm just more interested in wow, that's following along. When it comes to what they're doing for training, I know that I cannot do exactly what they're doing because they're running 130 miles, 140 miles a week, and that I would be unable to do. So I think it's great watching things and kind of maybe getting some advice and tips, but realizing that an elite athlete is a top marathon runner is in a totally different situation, and they probably they're relatively young and have the experience as a elite marathoner, but they haven't had a lot of other lived experience of maybe also having a job and kids. Some of them have kids, but that kind of stuff. So just watching it is fine, but just know that whatever their training is, you're not likely going to be able to replicate and have the same outcome. So just being able to watching it, getting some ideas for workouts, maybe just kind of being interested in their tips and things they're talking about, but realizing that just kind of keeping that in mind when you're looking at things what are these, where is this information coming from? What is the experience this person has? And does it kind of translate to what I'm my lived, what's going on with me right now? Are you a master's runner? Are you someone who has a full-time job? You're probably not going to be able to replicate what some of these people are doing or even saying. And I don't really find that the elite runners I'm following on YouTube are telling people to do things. I think that's just you see the workouts they're doing. And I think I've kind of run into a lot of people who are trying to replicate that. And it's you can't, because they're on they're different tier of athlete. There's a different level there. So it's interesting. You might be able to get some things from it, but don't take everything and try to replicate exactly what someone's doing on YouTube or whatever too. So that's one of the kind of along the thing with the swimming, because you mentioned that. I think.
Yeah, there's a particular swimmer. There's a swimmer that I follow on social media who's an accomplished swimmer. I mean, he was on a national team. I don't prescribe to, I don't agree with his method of coaching and the way that he's encouraging people to swim. Doesn't mean he's wrong. It just means that I don't prescribe to that. And I think that there are some holes that may not make what he's doing relevant or applicable to triathletes. Right. It might be it might be applicable to swimmers, but I don't necessarily agree with his method. But there's another swimmer that I follow who's of the same caliber that I do prescribe to the way that he coaches and the way that his explanations are for different things that we want to work on as a swimmer. And I agree with a lot of what he says. And so I think that there comes a time where you build some level of trust with somebody, even though you may not know them, because you have found that there's a collection of knowledge that is coming from that person that you tend to agree with, is consistent with other literature or other forms of instruction. He's not they're not the only one that is preaching this particular method. That should be a pretty big red flag. If they're the only one that's describing that this is the training approach that works, then that might be a little bit of a cautionary red flag. But you start to weed out the people that you're just like, I don't necessarily trust that guy. Doesn't mean that he's wrong. There's something about it where it just doesn't sit right, and so you move on to the next one. So
I would just like caution people to taking what they see, and just I'm the kind of person that watches stuff and then I kind of have to like, I'm not sure. I don't know about this person. I'm going to watch a few more videos. I'm going to feel this out a little bit before I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to take what they're saying. So I think just using that little bit of caution, really kind of like giving yourself some time to listen to more of what they have to say, like listen to other videos, like what else are they putting out there, and before you kind of decide, okay, I'm going to try that, So, and I think you're right. Like just trying out, a different training method, okay, I'm going to try this double threshold thing. Like, let me, that's a popular one. Like, I'm going to try this out for 30 days, or I'm going to do this once a week. I don't know, for a certain amount of time, and see if it's actually helping, because that's the fun thing about training is you can try, as long as it's not something kind of crazy that's going to get you injured, you can try different things and see if it's helping or not. So yeah. But don't prescribe to something and then continue doing it if it's not working and you try something different. Yeah. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah. Do you want to, okay. So
I can read it. Yeah. Do you want me to read it, or do you?
I'm just going to read the first part of it because it's a little bit, it's a little wordy, but she was trying to illustrate what it was that she was saying, but I think I understand. But this is from Nicole Urbanski. She is another friend of mine from Team Zoot, and Nicole, Katie. Mm-hmm. And as we're recording this episode, I want to give a shout out to Nicole. She is Kona bound, and today she raced Ironman Maine 70.3. Had a fantastic day. So congratulations, Nicole, on a well executed race. Job well done.
Awesome.
But Nicole's question was, does your race effort dictate your training efforts, or does the training dictate the race effort? And I think that this is a really, really interesting question. What she's kind of getting at is, if you have a particular level that you want to race at, do you say, okay, well, clearly it's not reasonable for me to be able to execute that race effort today because there would be no point in training, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to say whatever that level is, I'm going to do some percentage of it. Let's say, and she said, let's say 70%. So you take 70% of your race day goal, and that's where you start your training plan at. And then you try and build up from that to where you can then eventually, on race day, when you peak, you should be able to peak at that goal effort. Or do you create a plan based on where you are right now, and you just keep bumping up the intensity and the volume, and then on race day, you execute wherever it is that your fitness is at now on race day? And it kind of goes into the face of, well, should we go into race day with race day goals that we formulate at the beginning of the training cycle, or do we sit back and ask ourselves, well, how did training go? How consistent was I? How was my performance during training? Now, can I form race day expectations given the information that I've accumulated over this training plan, and what can I expect to execute on race day? For me and my approach, the way that I do my own personal racing and kind of the way that I approach with athletes, I'm in the second category. I know I do ask athletes, hey, what are your goals and things like that, and I try my best to get them to where their goal is, but things get in the way of that sometimes, and so I'm more inclined to say, okay, let's just evaluate where we are, and we're going to work hard. And come race day, the work that we put in is what we have access to. And that's going to effectively tell us how we should be racing. Because you can have that goal of some X number, and you started at some lower level of that. Training could have gone really, really well. And I think it opens you up to the possibility that you may be chasing performance on race day that may not be possible given things that are outside of your control, weather conditions, other racers. A crowded swim can affect your ability to swim in clean water. And all of a sudden now your performance suffered because, you had to fight a crowd where you're not used to it, or you didn't take that into consideration when you were forming your goal. And now all of a sudden you're already behind the 8 ball and you're only into the first discipline. And it kind of can snowball from there. Because then I've seen people say, now I'm behind the 8 ball, so that means I need to go a little bit harder on the bike to make up time. And now you've overbiked. And what you've done is you've sabotaged your run. So I think I'm more inclined to go with the second approach. We start where we are. We take our fitness right now, and we keep bumping up in a conservative, methodical way throughout the plan, as long as you have like a path forward and you're not just like randomly bumping things up. It's just like, okay, well, if I increase this week over this week and this week over this week, okay, I'm going to roll back this week. You have to put some forethought into it. So we're not going into it just saying race day is whatever it is. We're methodical about it, but I'm not chasing performance 16 weeks before the race even takes place. But I think that there's a nuance to that. It can be a little bit of both. I think it depends on the situation. Like if you want a Boston qualifying race, then that first method is probably more appropriate, because you have to have some kind of level of performance in order to get that Boston qualifying time.
I feel like it has a lot to do with like it kind of has to do with like your, what you're what you're capable of. Like if like in this case for me, like with my goal that I had for the marathon was, I know I'm capable of at least this particular time because I've achieved it before fairly recently. So when I'm formulating my training plan, I am like formulating it kind of based off of some sort of pace. It may not be like, I'm obviously not fit enough to get that when I start the training plan, but I'm like kind of keeping that in mind as I'm building it. I think if you're like, well, I want to achieve like this Boston qualifying time, but it's like kind of really ambitious. I don't know, like if it's like something that's kind of not within what you're maybe capable of, that might be a different story. Like you're like shooting for something way faster because you're just like, all right, I know I'm going to try to run like a sub-3, but I've only done a 3:30 or 4-hour marathon. And I'm just going to train to this time. Like, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to train these paces until I can make it work. I mean, you kind of, like, you can't really do that. But so you, first of all, have to kind of know it's your goal. If you're going to have it be like you're setting a goal for a time or something like that, you have to know you're capable of it. And then maybe you can train to it. But I think you also have to let the training dictate the race. Like, in my case, we talked about this with the grandmas, like, maybe at some point I didn't really do that. I was trying to, as I was kind of recovering from my illness, I was trying to force this pace because I wanted this outcome. And maybe I should have kind of at that point let the training, happen and just kind of seen how the race was going to go. I don't know. But like there may be certain times when you realize like, okay, I'm just kind of, it's like a melding of both of those in a way. My answer is like, maybe it's some sort of art of both of those things as you're going through the training. And if you kind of, I feel like you have to have some kind of goal, maybe. I mean, I guess you don't have to. I mean, you could go into it and just say like, whatever is going to be, right? But I think most people go into a race and they have some sort of goals. If you're hitting those goals, you have to kind of like, as you're creating the plan, like, yeah, you're going to be doing it in such a way that maybe you're starting out with some volume and then you're like adding in, a little more speed and you're building yourself up. You're kind of molding yourself into the shape that you want to be at to race that time or something, but you're not, I don't think the whole time you have to like force yourself into that sort of mold, so to speak.
I would make a case for is that sometimes if you set this goal, what happens if you could perform beyond that? But you
Yeah,
don't
that's true too.
because, you've trained to that performance expectation, but you're capable of so much more. So one of the ways that I implemented my training for like the past like year and a half is that I completely disregard, I did not make any race day goals at the beginning of the training plan. So what I said was, I don't formulate my goal until the week of the race. And then I'll sit down and I'll say, okay, how did training go? This is kind of what I would like to do. This is kind of what I expect I should be able to. And this is what I would do if I'm having a really bad day. So I have bad day, decent day, rock star day. So those are my three my three levels of performance for each of those. And I just race to my potential. I just go out and say, okay, this is what I have today. Let's go out and let's give it all that I've got and not try and just race to a particular goal, because I may have been bad at setting that goal and I may race beyond that expectation. But if I race to the expectation, then I'm leaving performance on the table. And part of it, I think, stems from, if I'm working with an athlete and they're like, I want to qualify for, 70.3 worlds, or I want a Kona slot, I think that there is a particular method to get you there. But ultimately, those results are dictated by who shows up that day, because we could formulate what should be able to get you a qualifying slot doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be good enough that day. Because if you have a bunch of really tough, hardcore athletes show up that day and they just blow the roof off of the race, you're like, well, normally that would have gotten me a slot, but
because
there were others
the
that
Kona
showed up.
slots are based off of like how you place, right?
Yeah, it's
like
all relative to
races,
where you
so
are.
That's
in your
a
age
tough
group.
one, because you could have that be your goal, but yeah, like then you have to be able. That one's a harder one to maybe train for, because you don't know who's showing up. Whereas a time goal is different. But I agree with you. I think it's hard because you don't want to limit yourself to, like, maybe if you have more potential, but I think you do have to have some idea as you're going into it, whether you're formulating that kind of in the beginning and you're sort of training to that goal time, or you're sort of coming to that at the end of the training plan. And arguably you should be kind of doing this all throughout, sort of doing the training based off of effort. You're like, you don't want to, like, if you're pushing yourself too hard during your training sessions to try to hit a pace, then you're going to be in trouble. So, arguably you should be a little bit cautious to be like, well, in order to hit this time, I need to be hitting these paces, 16 weeks out. And if that pace is incredibly challenging and you're finding that you're going way above your lactate threshold on a run or a training session, you're supposed to be like under that, or, you're sort of pushing yourself too hard, then that's going to be problematic. So you kind of have to be, going based off of effort, and then maybe checking in a little bit with yourself along the way to kind of see what your paces are and how you're progressing. But I do think at the same token, if you are now like, wow, I'm actually doing really great, like I'm surpassing some of these expectations I had for where I should be at, you do want to maybe check in with yourself periodically throughout the whole process to kind of see how things are going. Because it shouldn't be like you're so focused on this one goal, which I know, sometimes I've been guilty of, where you kind of lose that, you're so focused on hitting these specific times that you need to hit for these workouts in order to get this time that you want, that you're kind of losing sight either way. Either you're not fit enough or you're not hitting those goals, it's too hard, the workouts are too difficult. And you're putting your heart rate too high or something. Or on the other side, they're too easy, but you're like, well, these are the times I have to hit in order to get this time, but you're maybe leaving, you're not realizing that you're actually exceeded your fitness and maybe you're capable of so much more. So I do think either way, I mean, that's why I kind of say it's both, because unless you really are just wanting to go into it and you have no idea like what your goal is going to be, I think it's helpful to have some idea like of what you want to accomplish, but then along the way you have to kind of check in with yourself a little bit and and make sure you're not either pushing too hard to hit some sort of goal or not hard enough, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like a little bit of an art to try to figure that out, I think sometimes, but you have to maybe have a little melding of both the race dictating the training and then the training dictating the race. Does that make sense?
I think it can shift. So when you create the training plan, it's like, for her example, it's like, okay, well, this is the performance that I want. So this is the volume that I need. And so you set that as the path for the training plan. But then when it gets closer and closer to race day, you evaluate how that training went.
Evaluating.
And then you kind of say, okay, now given the training, this is what I can expect to race at, knowing that they may not be the same as what you set at the beginning. So I think for Nicole, I think you're right, Katie. It can be a little bit of both. No, it's like when I'm sitting there thinking about it, it's like I did, when I set the path for a training plan, I have some level of volume that I have in mind. So I was like, okay, well, if I have an athlete that's doing a 70.3, I know that I want their bike volume to be about 3 hours. 3 hours, I think, is like where I want them to be, like when we start to really like ramp things up. So then I say, okay, well then I'm going to take 45% of that and then add that to the 3 hours. So we're going to overtrain on the bike. So I do have like some kind of formulation on what I would like to see on race day, but I also have to weigh that. It's like, okay, where are they now? Can I even get them close to 3 hours?
Yeah, is it possible to get there?
That may not be possible, in which case then I have to tell the athlete, well, the way that we're going to do this training for this race is the second approach, where the training that we do is going to dictate what the race effort is. Because I'm not quite sure you have the fitness now that allows us to progress in a responsible way to get you to that performance expectation. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to work hard and going to execute a solid race. Now, if I have an athlete who says, I want to go sub 3 on a 70.3 bike, I'm already riding 2.5 hours as my long ride, then I say, okay, now this is reasonable. You have the current volume that supports that goal. And so it's a little bit easier to use that first approach where we say, okay, now we can use, this and just ramp it up to get you where it is that we want you to be. But it's really athlete specific. It's scenario dependent. But I think that there's reasons and nuances for both approaches. So I don't think one is better over the other. They're just dependent. So number 3. So we have a third question here, and I'll admit this one was from me. And the reason it was from me is because I saw this post on a social media, and I know it was clickbait, and so I thought I would raise it up to here. It says, how much of your training should and can be done on a trainer or a treadmill and still be prepared for a race?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Katie?
Yeah, I feel like I think I was listening to something the other day about a gentleman who was training. I think he lived in Canada, and he did a spring race, and almost all of his training was done on a treadmill, and he ran like a 2:09 or something marathon. So I think, I feel like there's a lot of debate. You'll have to kind of talk about the trainer specifically, because I think with the bike, maybe there's a little more nuance to being able to like handle your bike on the road a little bit. Like maybe there's, you probably want to do some level of that to be prepared, but and also maybe, the treadmill, the surface a little different. So I think doing some running on the road is probably helpful just to be prepared for the surface itself. But in terms of like developing fitness and doing workouts, like if all you have is a treadmill and it's, impossible to run outside because of the heat or the cold, I think you can do most of your running on a treadmill and be able to race just fine. In fact, I think a lot of people have a lot of success doing quite a bit of their running on a treadmill. I mean, I personally like to be outside because I just like to run outside, but I do run on my treadmill, in the heat or in the cold, because I'm sorry, I just don't want to be freezing or out in 110 degrees or something. So, but I feel like this is something on social media, people like to attack people who run or train, you know what I mean? And like, no, if you run on a treadmill, it is a run. It's like a legitimate thing. It can be a great tool. So, I don't. That drives me crazy when I see this, and I think that I wish I could remember the name of the marathoner because I was listening to another podcast and he had done majority of his training on a treadmill, and he did very well. So I think you can.
Yep.
I think it was like I honestly think he said it was like at one of those like 24-hour fitness or Planet Fitness also. So it wasn't even like a fancy treadmill, probably.
Right.
One of those Woodward ones or some, I don't know, some like one of those Nordic track or I don't know, those $5,000 treadmills. I feel like, you can get the work, if whatever allows you to get the work done and get fit will help you.
So
in your race,
this is my argument. I think that there is a time and a place for both. Both are important components to an overall well-rounded training plan. Now, let's approach this from the bike perspective. I use the trainer a lot, but I also ride outside a lot. So the reason behind this guy's post that he made on social media is that he was saying that the vast majority of your training, almost all of your training, should be outside. And I don't agree with that. The reason that I don't agree with that is because it's really hard to do structured, focused, purposeful work outside. Especially if you're dealing with terrain that doesn't allow you to execute a desired intensity for a specific duration, not like you can on a trainer. So I think when it comes to those types of workouts, it is completely reasonable and actually preferred that you do them on a trainer. We can do very specific muscle targeting, skill development work on the trainer. It's valuable. Now, that does not mean that all of your training should be done on a trainer plugged into Zwift and you're just riding with your friends on it's effectively a video game. All right. Because there are valuable skills that, it can be fun and engaging, but there are skills that you do not get a chance to develop, like feeding, taking in, reaching down and grabbing your water bottle while your bike is moving, or trying to eat a gel while you're in aero position flying down the road is not replicable on a trainer. It's not, you don't get the skill development of what it's like to ride in the wind. If you have deep set carbon wheels and you get crosswinds, you need to learn how to shift your weight in such a way that keeps you upright and keeps you stable. Also learning how to hold a line and, not necessarily riding in a group, because with triathlon, we don't ride in groups. There are rules against that, but being able to hold a line and not be swerving all over the road is a valuable skill that you must
Or if there's
learn.
like a pothole, like learning how to like maneuver.
Learning how to read the road where you're at. And so just not zoning out. Those things must be done like outside. So those are skills. So I would say maybe your long stuff can be done outside if the conditions allow it. There's nothing, I've done my long rides on a trainer where, it was raining outside, or I just did not have the time in my schedule to allow me to drive to wherever it is I needed to go to ride. But I think that there should be some subset of your training that does take place outside in order to learn those skills and become comfortable on a bike. So I think that there's a time, like I said, there's a time and place for both. For the treadmill specifically, I love the treadmill. And I work with athletes that absolutely hate the treadmill because they want to be entertained. They're like, I'm bored. And it just reminds me of like a little kid that walks into the room and they're on summer break and they've only been on summer break for like a day and they're kicking and screaming. They're like, I'm bored, entertain me. That's the picture that I get in my head, because I love the treadmill because it allows me to do very specific focused work. And if that means that, hey, I want to do some strength conditioning runs, I have direct access and control over the elevation of the treadmill. I can dial in the intensity like I want or like I need to. When it comes to doing speed work, I have, I can teach my body what it feels like to run at those paces. So that way, when I get outside on the road, I can execute that just as effectively because I know what it feels like. And I'm not like tied to my watch to confirm that I'm running that kind of pace. For
True.
me
Yeah,
specifically, the demands of running outside on the road would be such that I can't run consistently. With the condition of like, my Achilles and my ankles, just running on the road is just really beats me up compared to running on a treadmill. Does that mean that all of my runs are on a treadmill? No. I do some of my runs outside when it calls for it, but I would say probably 80% of my run training is on the treadmill. And I have vastly exceeded my run performance in my races over the past 2 years. So the treadmill is effective as long as you're purposeful with it.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's great for, like you said, pacing, like putting it in and pace and being able to keep a pace. You don't have to watch, keep an eye on your watch every time, or if you're setting it, it's kind of nice in that way. You can kind of set the workout up and you kind of learn, and it maybe is a helpful tool to learn different pacing. That makes sense because you're setting it on the treadmill. So, and it can be very effective. And like, I think the hard thing is like mimicking on a treadmill, maybe mimicking terrain that you might encounter. So like you have to almost be intentional about changing the incline a little bit, or like doing some uphill work. Otherwise it's all kind of on a flat surface. So, you have to be a little bit intentional on how you set the treadmill up and how you go about it to be able to kind of mimic a little more what you might encounter generally being outside, where there may be a little bit of uphills and downhills. But downhills are a little harder if your treadmill doesn't do that. I do think you have to, it's helpful to do some outside running if you're going to be doing a race outside. And I really think it depends on like the person. Like, you love the treadmill. I don't like dislike it. I just don't want to do most of my training on it because I like to be outside. I like the fresh air. I get a lot more out of being outside because it's like I want to be in nature. There's like other benefits I'm getting from being outside. So it's not that I'm necessarily bored. I just like on the treadmill, it's just that I like to be outside because I like to experience nature and see things and have the birds and things flying by. But it's really individual. And I think to like villainize people who use do more treadmill in their training is I don't understand that concept. Like, oh, you're not a real runner or some sort of, it drives me crazy. It's whatever works for you to get your training in. We're all out there doing our runs, and if it's helping you and you're getting something out of it, and I do think it's a very effective tool. Yeah. And I do. Yeah. There's even like those lever systems where people can offload a little bit of the weight. And, if they're injury prone, there's a lot of benefits to it. So go ahead, use your treadmill. But if you have an outside race, so either biking or, obviously most races are outside. I'm assuming, there's maybe there are treadmill races out there, but, training is a little bit outside to get some of that, like you're saying. But yeah. I think we kind of covered that one pretty well.
All right. So the next one is from Anonymous. And so this is going to be a nutrition one. And so the question becomes, how do you calculate your nutrition? And this is like carb and calorie, but I think it's more carb than it is anything else. We've never really talked about calorie targeting.
No, we haven't. I'm not allowed. We mentioned it a little bit in our weight loss.
Calories aren't created equal, so I'm not quite sure if that's something that.
So it's like asking, how do you calculate your nutrition for training?
Yes. So how do you calculate your carb needs for training and racing?
Yeah. So this is how the only way to get any of this absolutely accurately 100% correct is if I were to put you in like a little box and measure, like have you do all your training in the box and measure all your oxygen consumption and your CO2 output and those types of calculations to get your calories. And then somehow I'd have to figure out all with this, like how much percentage of carb versus fat you're burning for, you could see how to get this 100% correct where it's spot on would be complicated and involve a lot of expensive equipment. So the way I sort of do it is I'll generally calculate someone's basal metabolic rate And then add in some sort of activity factor, like let's say outside of training, you're sedentary. So maybe it's like I'm just multiplying that by 1.2 to get some sort of basal rate of calories. And then based off the training, it's kind of adding on the calories that you would expend during your training. And sometimes, like, because you're, there might be a little bit of nuance there, but it's like, let's say your basal rate just for the get through the day, not your basal metabolic rate, but just what you need to just get through the day is like 1800, but you run, like an hour at a certain intensity. If it's a lower intensity, maybe you're burning 500 calories versus like a higher intensity, it might be 600 or 700. Then I would be adding like that, hour long run, the energy to that to kind of get an idea. It's a ballpark, right? Like I'm using equations. None of this is 100% correct. So this is why it's helpful to work with someone who can kind of like help figure this out for you and then be able to adjust it based off of different factors, weight, how you're feeling, how you're running, everything kind of is going. But then what I do is I kind of take basically your protein needs are going to be pretty much the same day to day. They don't go up significantly on a high training volume day. So it may a little bit, but maybe it's 0.8 to 1 grams per pound, roughly. That's just that's going to stay pretty much the same. And same with fat. Fat might be 20 to 30% of your total calories, but the grams aren't going to change drastically. It may be in this example, it's something like 60 to 80 grams fat. It kind of stays the same. It goes up a little bit the more calories you burn, just because we're going to eat more fat in general as we need to get more calories. But the biggest shift, the biggest change day to day is going to be carbs. That's going to be, it could be as low as on an 1800 calorie day for this individual, it could be as low as 150 grams on that day. But maybe they're doing a 2-hour ride or a 2-hour run, and that day it could be 300 or 400 grams. So the biggest change, the biggest thing you're going to be really adding in to get those extra calories is going to be mostly carb. I think by calculating your calorie needs and then your needs for protein and fat, you can then the remainder will come from carbs. And on a really high calorie burning day, the carbs are going to be much higher than a lower calorie burning day, if that makes sense. The more energy you expend, the more of that's coming from carb. So it's hard because, I'd have to like write out all the equations and you could maybe figure this out yourself. But even like the timing of how those carbs are consumed are going to be important. Like if you have a big training ride in the morning, but you don't eat any carbs and you just decide you're going to do a fasted 2-hour ride and then all 400 grams of carbs are coming in right before bed, that's going to be not helpful. That's not a good distribution. Yeah. So it's really a bit nuanced, but that's kind of how I think about it. I don't do it based off percentages. I generally don't calculate like, how MyFitnessPal does it, like 20%, protein, 30% fat, and then the remainder is 50% is coming from carb. Because obviously, like if you have a 4,000 calorie day, like the protein and the fat are going to be really high in that. Percentage based. Your protein needs are pretty set day to day. They might go up a little bit when you're training more, but not a whole lot. So I actually do calculate that differently. Then that's why I don't really love like MyFitnessPal and some of those trackers, because the way they're calculating it isn't, I think, helpful for athletes. The way I calculate it is different. So I know that's really complicated. I hope I probably just confused everyone.
Of this question was more in lines of creating a nutrition strategy for like a training session or a race.
For training.
I think that was
we can take all that out. I'm sorry.
No. It's fine. I think that this is valuable information because that kind of that stuff still supports our ability to train. Yeah. So let's say that you have an athlete that comes to you. How do you do that?
Let's say in that scenario where you're calculating all your needs and those carb, you've kind of come to this conclusion like, okay, I need 400 grams of carbs a day. Like majority of those carbs are going to come around like your training. You know what I mean? Like you're now calculated your daily carb needs. So I think this kind of does come into play here because you know exactly how many carbs you need to maybe support that level of training. But then you're thinking about how are you calculating it for before, during, and after? So you're kind of taking that carb allotment and thinking, okay, I need to make sure I'm getting a good amount in before and after. Maybe if you have 400-gram day, you're kind of thinking, okay, I probably need to get like 75 or something before and after. I need to get 60 grams an hour. And then it comes down to, the carbs that you're taking in for your during training kind of depends on how well you've trained your gut, like how well you're able to take in carbs and how long the duration is. So it kind of comes back to that.
So how do you set that? How do you set that amount? With the popularization of these high carb, trying to get in 100 grams of carbs, 130 grams of carbs. But that's not reasonable for everybody. So is your carb intake going to be a function of whether you're a larger athlete, a smaller athlete? Like if I'm working with somebody who is like 130 pounds, I'm not going to make them try and consume 60 grams of carbs an hour versus if I'm working with somebody who's 220, maybe they need 70 to 80 grams of carbs. So how do you set that?
It would be like a little bit dictated based off of weight. The way I would say is like most people would probably benefit from at least 60 grams of carbs an hour, no matter what their weight is. But somebody like myself might be okay with, because I'm a lighter athlete, I could kind of stay in that 60 to 70 gram range, where maybe if somebody's burning more. But it is really kind of based off of how much we can actually digest, absorb, and utilize. And unfortunately, you and I aren't that different in that. Just because maybe I'm a smaller athlete doesn't mean I'm able to actually digest and take those carbs and use them quicker or less quick than you. Does that make sense? So it's not necessarily like this particular question isn't necessarily weight based or athlete size based. Obviously someone maybe has a bigger gut potentially, but so there are certain aspects of it. It's more to do with how quickly you can train your gut to utilize, digest, and actually take those carbs and put them into the energy system, if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say there is yes, maybe your calories that you burn are going to be higher, your demands are higher. If a larger athlete could get themselves to be able to digest and utilize and actually get used to eating more carbs, it probably would help them better. But just because I need 60 doesn't mean that you can handle 120. Does that make sense? Because the limitation is between all of us.
That's just your ability to absorb it. So I get that point.
Right.
The one calculation that I've seen that I've actually started using is I take my body weight in pounds and I convert that to kilograms. So I take my body weight and divide it by 2.205. And then my carbs per hour is going to be your body weight in kilograms multiplied by 0.6. And that's kind of the floor or the foundation in which we say, this is where we need, that's like the minimum that we should be trying to get to. If you're not there yet, then we have to train the gut to at least get us to there. So if I'm looking at an athlete who is 130 pounds, based on that calculation, they should really need maybe 35 grams of carbs an hour. Versus somebody who's like me, who's heavier than that, I need close to 70. I haven't trained my gut to take in 70, but I'm working towards that. But if I take that same athlete and tell them that I want them to start taking in 60 grams of carbs an hour, I'm trying to get them to consume double the carbs than what they really should need on the foundation. Does that make sense?
No, I disagree. I think because 100, someone I'm probably would, if you calculated that out, probably pretty close to that 35 or 40 grams an hour. But the rate in which I'm burning carbs is probably much higher than that. Most athletes would benefit from trying to get as much as they can possibly take in, no matter what their size. So I'd be really hesitant to use a calculation like that and tell a smaller athlete, oh, you only need 35 grams of carbs. That's just not enough, even because we're still burning a lot of energy, especially if that athlete is really running quite fast, like they're really pushing their body in a marathon or something like that, that's just not enough for just about anybody to take in and actually be able to make it through their race without burning some level of glycogen that might slow them down. So I don't love those calculations specifically for the race fueling during race, because I think in that case you would be severely limiting the smaller athlete to say, oh, well, based off this calculation, you only need 35 grams an hour. That's still too little. To try to hit that 60 grams of carbs is just a good baseline for just about anyone. But somebody that maybe is a little bit of larger maybe could tolerate more potentially. So yes, try to get to a higher amount is always a good idea, but I don't want to limit any particular athlete to only 35 grams. That's just not going to be enough, because they're still burning, likely like at least 500 or 600 calories an hour, and a good, I don't know the rate exactly, like how many grams of carbs per hour. It probably does depend a little bit on their, the how fast they're running and all those aspects. But it's like 35 grams, even for a small person, is just not enough. So when I'm working with people, it's just 60 grams. Like try to hit at least 60 grams an hour, no matter who you are or what your size. And the more you can get, like the better you are, the better off you are. But there's going to be a limitation for most people. So I don't like to give that particular. I don't like when it comes to like in training nutrition, like during training nutrition, I don't like to use those types of formulas, because I do think that that smaller athlete would be like, oh, I only need 35 grams an hour, and that's too little for most athletes, most endurance athletes, even if they're on the smaller side. Does that make? But it would, and then if you can think about it, like, yeah, maybe that would makes more sense for maybe somebody who's a little heavier, because then now they're starting at 60 grams.
Yeah.
But when it comes to in race or in training fueling, that's probably the only time I wouldn't use like a kilogram based calculation like that.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit different. Yeah. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like you're going to be burning more carbs and generally calories if you're heavier, but and it really depends a lot on your pace too. But I mean, some of these elite marathon runners who are running 5-minute miles are burning a lot of energy. Like a lot of it. Like it could be equivalent to somebody who's like 200 or 300 pounds running. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's hard to like put that calculation based off of weight. Okay. Like make that calculation based off of weight alone. That's why it's complicated. I know. I wish I wish I could say like, yes, use this particular calculation for that. And it's not that simple.
Okay. So
I think I just confused everyone in me. No, or hopefully I explained it well.
I mean, I've been working with these two ladies with a particular race plan, and I think that they were under fueling. And so I walked in and I was like, I want to get you guys to 60. I want to get you up to like at least 60 grams of carbs an hour. And then one of the ladies she's an older athlete, smaller stature. And so I started to really think about it, and I was just like, man, because I looked at that, because I had seen that calculation before, because I had used it for me in order to determine like how many carbs I should be getting in. And so I walked it back and I was like, man, for 60 grams of carbs an hour, that's somebody who weighs about 220 pounds for that calculation to be valid. And I was like, there's the lady that I'm working with is nowhere near that. So am I really doing her a disservice by trying to get her to consume more calories, really ramping up the calories compared to where she is right now, to try and get her to a target that may not even be reasonable for somebody of her size? So that was kind of, I think, the spirit of the question.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the calories that someone's burning, it's dependent on weight a little bit, but it's also dependent on how quickly they're running, and there's so many factors. I personally would just try to kind of get most of my athletes around 60 grams. So if they're starting at 30, that's fine, but the goal is to try to get it up to at least 60 grams for most people. Okay. Yeah. Unless, I don't know.
Where do you draw the line?
Well, the draw the line is kind of when do you start, like, when is it that you're taking it in and it's just not being digested and utilized, and your gut is just, like there's going to be a limitation. You can train your gut as much as you want, but there's going to be some sort of line that people kind of hit and they're just not able to go past, in terms of, so it could be, but you just try to work a way up a little bit, but you don't need to be doing 120 probably an hour,
Right.
either, because that's, some of these elite athletes are doing 120, 150 an hour. And I think people are thinking, oh, they got to do that too. So it's probably somewhere in between, but it's not really going to be dictated necessarily based off of your weight for that particular.
Is there a ceiling in which we can train our gut? Or
probably. I think that's what they're trying to say is like, we can take this in, but are we actually able to not only digest it, but actually like take the carbs and utilize it, like actually oxidize the carbs and use them for energy. And that's why I think it gets a little bit questionable sometimes when we're hitting these, even some of the elite athletes hitting numbers like 150 an hour, because as our body actually being able to not only digest and absorb it, but actually, utilize it. I think it'll be really interesting because we're going to, especially with some of these formulations with like Morton gels and some of these other gels that are kind of claimed to be like maybe slower releasing. And so you're having a more trickle effect of like carbs instead of a whole bunch all at once, like kind of trickling in. And over the course of an hour, maybe you are able to, digest and utilize them. And the more carb you can kind of get per hour, the less likely you're going to run out of glycogen and the less likely you'll hit the wall. So it really becomes even more and more important for athletes who are doing anything longer than probably 3 or 4 hours, like an ultra distance event. Ironman, ultras, the more carbs you can get per hour, the less likely you're going to hit that wall, because the more you can match your carb needs almost, so you're not depleting yourself. Because if you can kind of think about it, you're like, you have a certain number that you're burning every hour, and there's a certain amount coming from fat, and there's a certain amount coming from carb. And the more you can kind of match your needs for carbs per hour, the less likely you're gonna, run out of that energy source and hit the wall, or kind of not be able to continue going. So that is the rate limiting factor for many of these, especially really long distance races, is the ability to consume enough carb to be able to keep going. I think that's why one of the reasons we're seeing so many of these ultra races, being able to see these people running like these paces. I mean, the paces they're doing for like a 100-mile race is incredible. And I think a lot of it is probably because people are just fueling better, so they're able to maintain that pace for longer because they're not sort of hitting that limitation of running out of glycogen and carbs. Does that make sense? So
yeah,
I don't know. We kind of went on to a totally different topic there. But.
No, and this is a valid question. So I think my next thing would be, okay, at what point do you just tell an athlete that, look, there's no matter how much you try and train your gut, you are never going to be able to utilize 80 grams of carbs an hour. So that's your particular ceiling. So that's what I meant by, is there a ceiling?
Yeah, that's probably
in terms of like
true. There's probably
the
like a ceiling.
But then
I think there is
could be working with another
people,
athlete who could easily surpass that ceiling. So they have their ceiling. And so I think,
yes.
At what
But
point
I don't
in time
know if
do
it's
we
size
just
dependent. Yeah.
That's the question that I've got. Is it size dependent or age dependent?
I don't think so.
Do older athletes need the same kind of fueling strategy that a younger athlete would?
Yeah.
Even
though
like the absolute even though the absolute number in terms of like their pace is not the same, the relative intensity can be equivalent.
Yeah.
So does that dictate their fueling need? Or does it change it in such a way that older athletes just don't need to fuel as much? Younger athletes need to fuel more. At what point do you just say, I'm not going to worry about training my gut because I can't get past this no matter what I do. So this is my max that I can consume and utilize.
I think that's true. I mean, I think people kind of will hit some sort of, if you can try different types of fuels, that might help. But I think, you'll maybe hit a max, and that's that's just going to be what you're going to be able to do, and that, somebody else might be able to tolerate more. And I don't know is it have to do with how many transporters they have for, like, some people may have the ability to have more transporters to transport glucose or fructose, and they might be dependent on the individual. So that, and older, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we even know that. Does that sort of ability change as we age? I don't think so, but maybe in the sense that, do those transporters decrease as we age? I just don't think we know that exactly. Okay. I think like an older athlete would still benefit from trying to, maximize their ability to get carbs in per hour, or like, but I don't know if there's any research on like masters athletes yet on these, because I really do think like this whole concept of like not only fueling enough, but almost like just like getting that 60 grams an hour, which used to be kind of the standard for most people. It was like, now it's like this whole high carb revolution. I think there's more, like we're really needing to understand what actually is really happening when somebody takes in 120 grams or 150 grams of carb an hour, and maybe doing a little bit more research in that area of high carb fueling to really understand what's like, how are we changing the gut? How are we utilizing the carbs? Like, what's happening from a physiological standpoint? I would like, that'd be a cool research study to be a part of, I guess. But I think we know kind of but we don't know is like, wow, some of these people are really able to get so much carb. What's happening to allow them to be able to do that? And are they actually like utilizing all of that carb? Or is it, I don't know, like it's obviously being used somehow. Otherwise, I think they would start to have gut issues. But is it, is there a cap? Is there a limit? What's the limit to this? Is there like a point at which the body can just, it's like, maybe that's dependent, but it is fascinating, and it doesn't have as much, I don't think, maybe to do with age or even body size necessarily. It just maybe some people have more adaptable guts than others potentially. So, I don't know. Yeah.
So
I mean, the next one, does fueling needs change as you get older, kind of goes along with that question. I mean, we can touch on that. I kind of did, but I think in terms of carb, I don't think so. There are things that change as we get older, potentially. I mean, with maybe the way, like the percentages of carbs versus fat we're burning, there's things that are physiologically changing as we get older that might influence how much carb or fat we're needing. Probably the biggest thing I can think of with age is more so to do with hydration, and just there are some things that change with our ability to kind of, hydrate and be able to feel the sense of thirst. And so that's a one I run into a lot with aging athletes. But I don't know if the fueling need, I think just we slow down, unfortunately, a little bit. So maybe they just change because we're changing in our pacing, and but not anything substantial. I think an older athlete still needs to fuel, and their calculations for energy their energy needs may come down slightly, but then that might affect it. But in general, it's not going to change any sort of substantial amount where it's like, this is so different that we have to have a totally different way of calculating it. So yeah, okay.
Good.
Us. It's getting hot in here. Like I have my office door closed, so it's like the air, and it's like 100 degrees today, and the air is not circulating into my office, so I am like sweaty. So I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, so let's call it. I think we've exhausted the questions that we had. So thank you guys for those of you who submitted questions. We really appreciate it. I definitely want to do more episodes like this. So if this has been interesting to you, and you have questions and you just did not get a chance to get them in, I hope that you will feel comfortable and confident enough to post those questions in the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. So it's that closed group that's on Facebook. If you're not a member, all you have to do is just answer one simple question and agree to the group rules, and it lets you in. We created it to build out a community that's tied to the podcast. It also gives you an avenue and us an avenue for additional content that is supplemental to the podcast. But really, I really want to see that community grow just so that we kind of learn and support each other and learn from each other. And this is a great place for you guys to reach out to us. If you do have questions, you don't feel like just posting them in social media, which I totally get. You can always send us a message. So you can send us an email to the podcast. Our email address is in the closing credits of every episode that we've done. So if you want, you can send us an email. That mailbox is monitored daily, so it's not going to slip through the cracks. And you can submit your questions that way, and then we'll accumulate questions, and then one of us, either Coach Katie or me, will reach out to you individually and let you know when your question is going to be addressed on the episode, so that you can make sure that you tune in and listen to that episode. So another reason to join that Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group that's on Facebook. Let's see. If you have enjoyed this discussion and it has resonated with you, or you feel like one of the questions that we talked about, you know that there's another person who has a similar question that you think it would be helpful to, I hope that you will share the episode with them, leave a comment and a review for the podcast. Those are greatly appreciated and help us so much. We do not monetize the podcast. So we do not have ads. We do not have sponsors. You do not have commercials. We just come to you straight through, no interruptions. And, we're not trying to sell you anything, training plans and hemp mattresses and supplements. We wanted to be able to keep every single episode pure and unconnected to anybody else. Nobody drives the discussion other than listeners and our own interests. So that's where we come up with the content. So there's no outside influence whatsoever. And so that's the way that we want to keep it. But in order to keep it that way, we really would love to have more reviews and comments to really increase the exposure so that other people can easily find us when they search, endurance sports or triathlon or running on whatever platform they're getting their podcasts from. So these comments and reviews really, really help the algorithm pick up us and recommend us to listeners who are searching for content. So if you haven't left one, I hope that you will consider doing so. Whatever platform that you're listening to, whether it's on Spotify or iTunes or Amazon, or even if you're on YouTube and you're watching the episode, you can leave comments and reviews and subscribe, and it definitely helps. So I appreciate anybody who's left a comment and a review. So thank you very much. If you haven't done so, it only takes a couple seconds, and those are greatly appreciated. So thank you. We're both active coaches, and we're bringing on athletes onto our roster. It is now July of 2026, and I know that there are people out there that are looking to build 2027 race calendars. So if you're interested in trying something new, or you're just tired of pinging ChatGPT and getting crappy advice from AI, and you want to go to a coach and have them set up a plan with you and support you and guide you along, and you're just tired of trying to find workouts to do, I hope that you will consider reaching out to either Coach Katie or myself. We'd love to talk to you. You can reach out to Coach Katie at Katie or at fuel2run.com. You can go to her website. You can reach out to her through there. You can also reach out to me, Coach Justin, at tabularossaracing.com. All of our contact information is out there. We also have tons of other resources that are on our websites. We have blogs and documentaries and videos and all kinds of other stuff that's out there to help you along in your journey. You can also see our coaching philosophies and the way that we interact with our athletes. And so do your due diligence, talk to other coaches and find one that works for you. But we hope that we will be on your list of people to talk to. So we look forward to hearing from you if you're looking for someone. Other than that, I think that does it for all the standard housekeeping stuff. We talked about the Facebook group. There's also a poll that we posted. I want to bring this up because I think I'm not getting a whole lot of responses from it, but there's a poll that is in the closed Facebook group, and it's about the content that we pushed out for like our individual race builds. So Katie just completed her Road to Grandma's, did multiple episodes talking about her build and her process of training for that race. I did a build for Ironman Florida 70.3. If you enjoy that kind of content, other than just kind of instruction, you're looking for tips and strategies and all that kind of stuff, but you just like hearing about what it is that we're doing. And, we're not just coaches, we're athletes as well. And so we train just like everybody else does. So if you're interested in following along with us on our journeys as well as athletes, let us know. Go out to the Facebook group. It's pinned up at the very top, and let us know if you enjoy that content. If so, we'll keep coming out with those kinds of episodes. It's just additional content, and we want to make sure that we're bringing you episodes that matter to you, stuff that you enjoy, that you can learn from, listen to, get motivated by, whatever the reason may be. But let us know if you like it. That would be appreciated. So thank you so much for tuning in today. This has been episode 111 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, where we did a couple Q&As from our listeners. So again, thank you guys so much for the support you continue to show the podcast. And I've been your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie, and we'll talk to you guys again next time. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.